Until recently, American history books all began at 1492. We were taught that there was no civilization here until Europeans came to make history, until Europeans arrived to bring civilization to the savages. But what does that mean? Uncivilized. It means that there is no system of government, trade, transportation, education, no concepts of mathematics, earth sciences, engineering, or writing, and especially no agriculture. That's important because world history classes always began around 10, 12,000 years ago when agriculture first came to the Fertile Crescent of Mesopotamia. Agriculture brought the beginnings of civilization because it allowed people to settle down together instead of constantly hunting and gathering. So, it might be worth noting that 10,000 years ago, Native Americans were not starting to plant crops. They were already genetically modifying a prairie grass called teosinte to create the crop that we now call maize or corn. Today, corn is a worldwide crop, the number one grain harvested every year. It's used as food for people and livestock, biofuels, and eco-friendly plastics. But here's the thing, there is no such thing as wild maize. It's completely a human-made crop, and it's completely Native American. If native farmers had accomplished nothing but corn, it would still be fair to say that they were the most important agriculturalists of all times. But, as they say on TV, wait, there's more. At the same time, Native Americans were also modifying nightshade, a deadly poison, to create tomatoes and potatoes and eggplant and peppers and tobacco and even petunias. Long before agriculture reached Europe, native farmers were already building agricultural terraces and freeze-drying potatoes for storage. But it doesn't stop there. Today, almost two-thirds of the world's foods were first grown and in many cases genetically modified by Native American agriculturalists. So, no matter where you are on Earth, chances are good that local chefs are cooking traditional Native American foods for supper tonight. Can you imagine Italian food without tomato sauce? Or Thai food without peppers? Or a French cafe without coffee? That's all Native American food. So that's who we are as Native Americans. We're the most important farmers in human history. And if agriculture gives rise to civilization, then it makes sense that we'd see signs of early civilization all over North and South America. And indeed, we do. This is Poverty Point, Louisiana. That's what the immigrants called it. We don't know what the mound builders called it. What we do know is that this is the oldest planned city on Earth. It's laid out in the shape of a giant thunderbird. Houses are all along the ridges forming the wings. There's a plaza at the heart of the bird and a sacred mound at the head. How old is this city? Some of the mounds there have been dated to 3500 BC. That's more than 1,000 years older than the pyramids of Giza. That's even older than Stonehenge. And here's the thing. You can't get a planned city to show up accidentally. You have to have city planners, you have to have government officials in place with authorities to approve the plans. You need work orders, surveyors, mathematicians, and engineers. There has to be some way to carry accurate information back and forth amongst all those different stakeholders so that everybody can get it right. In short, you need a system of writing or drawing to build a city so that everyone is literally on the same page. The fact that this writing, the plan for Poverty Point, has not survived doesn't mean that it never existed. The city is proof that it did. Oh, and keep in mind that Poverty Point was only the beginning. Our ancient ancestors built cities all over Turtle Island. The greatest of all was Cahokia, the city of the sun. At its zenith, around 1400 AD, Cahokia was as large as contemporary London, Paris, and Tokyo combined. Let me show you just one of the small wonders of Cahokia. This is Woodhenge, a solar lunar calendar made of huge logs. The logs were placed to align with specific celestial events. Now, you cannot build something like this by trial and error. Once you stand up one of those huge logs, you can't decide it needs to be moved 6 inches over to the right. There has to be a plan from the beginning, and it has to be right. You need astronomers and mathematicians to figure the correct angle, surveyors to mark the correct spot, and engineers to make sure that the tree would wind up in the right spot. All of that requires some form of written communication to get the job done, so all those people can talk to each other and understand the end goal. If we need more evidence, we can try this. These are the magnificent cliff dwellings of Mesa Verde. They look almost organic, like they grew from the rock. But every one of these homes is set back from the rock overhang at just the correct angle to provide shade in the summer and direct sunlight in the winter, meaning that these are the first structures on Earth to intentionally employ passive solar heating and cooling. Now, those calculations require more advanced mathematics and structural engineering to get everything in place correctly, and yes, even more written communication. So let's go a little farther southwest to the land of the Hohokam people. There they used irrigation canals, miles and miles in length, to cause the desert to bloom and to grow their crops. Well, in the 20th century, the city of Phoenix decided they needed an up-to-date plan for irrigation in the area. They did aerial views and satellite surveys to determine where was the best place to build canals for the optimum effect and benefit in that area. And they discovered that the Hohokam had already done that. In every case, the canals were exactly where modern science and laser surveys showed they should be. Now, the Hohokam didn't get every canal in the perfect spot by sending out a couple of guys with shovels and then moving the canal over a couple of feet if it wasn't quite right. They had to survey the proper route, build in just the right amount of fall, and the right construction techniques to make it last for thousands of years. Another great example of these advanced calculations hidden in plain sight is the Chaco Canyon Sun Dagger. This amazing solar calendar looks to be just part of the natural landscape. From the outside, it's just 3 boulders leaning against the rock way up high on top of the butte. But the boulders are spaced at exactly the right gap and exactly the right angle to allow a dagger of light on the summer solstice, right down the middle of the large spiral. And 2 daggers on the winter solstice to either sides of the large spiral. Now, none of that could happen without careful calculation and planning. So that is who we are as Native Americans. We are some of the greatest mathematicians, engineers, surveyors, builders, astronomers, and communicators that the world has ever known. But somebody may say, hold up now, you keep talking about calculations and notes and drawings, but everybody knows that Native Americans had no systems of writing, correct? Well, as a matter of fact, that's not correct. When the conquistadores sacked the Aztec temple, they destroyed truckloads of books because they couldn't read them. Therefore, they reasoned the books had to be devil worship, so they had to be destroyed. Then they announced to the world that Indians had no system of writing. 4 Mayan books, codices, were sent to Europe rather than the furnace, but no one could decipher them until 1962, when scholars of Egyptian glyphs finally began to study Mayan writings. When they cracked the code, they finally learned what was on the printed pages. At last, they discovered that the Dresden Codex, considered by some to be the rarest book in the world, was full of mathematical computations, multiplication tables, dates for future eclipses and lunar events for hundreds of years to come. So that is who we are as Native Americans. We are some of the greatest technical writers in human history. But ancient people made still more amazing discoveries. These are Olmec or Mayan sculptures, commonly known as fat boys. They're found all over southern Mexico and Guatemala. Some are as large as a small car and weigh more than 12 tons. And it turns out that some of them have a secret. Some of them are made of lodestone, a naturally occurring magnetic stone. But the fat boys that are magnetic are only magnetic on their right temple. And here's the thing, no magnet was added to the carving. Somehow, they knew how to carve a 12-ton rock, so one magnetic spot would always be in the exact same place. And to this day, no one knows how they could do it. The Chinese were thought to have discovered magnetism around the 4th century BC, but archaeologists now believe that the Fat Boys may have been carved 1,000 years before that, making native artisans the first to manipulate magnetism. So that's who we are as native people. We're among the world's greatest geologists and artisans. Well, I assure you, we've just scratched the surface. I haven't even gotten to political achievements or any of the other things I'd love to talk to you about soon. But what is our point here today? The first is that myth of native people being uncivilized savages. That myth is deep and powerful. In the face of all the evidence I've shared here in this slideshow, there are many who find it still easier to believe that aliens did all this stuff than that Native Americans could have done any of it. So facts alone will never change the savage narrative. We have to champion these truths for ourselves and future generations, because no one will believe the truth until we embrace it ourselves. The next point goes hand in hand with that truth. All of these sites, all of these discoveries, all of the math and the engineering, all of it is sacred. And all Native people can step forward to claim those sacred spaces as our own. Poverty Point is just off Interstate 20 in Louisiana. It's a World Heritage Site, but the day I visited there was one ranger present and one visitor, myself. I rode all 5 miles around the entire city, blasting Northern Cree and Jonathan Miracle out of the stereo on my Harley. And I walked right up to the top of the sacred mound, played my flute and prayed in Cherokee, and there was no one there to ask me what I was doing or why. Can you imagine visiting the pyramids of Giza and having the place to yourself? The more we as Native people go to these sacred sites with reverence and respect, to pray and hear the voices of the ancient ones, the more we will truly know who we are.